Hi, I'm Maria Theohiris, or Vella says on social media. Welcome back to Sober 50 podcast on Organised Dell. Grab cuppa and relax with us.
A skirl is the sound that bagpipes make. They speak of the skirl of the pipe. And I have Scots in my background, as well as being a musician.
The lovely voice that you've just heard is Dell. You'll find her on Instagram at @so_curls and swirls. A big shout out to the podcast's Patreon supporters. I'd love it if you could join them in supporting this podcast each month so that I can continue to provide it to you for free. Dell, thanks for coming onto the podcast. Tell us what you usually sew.
Well, I usually sew clothes to wear around the house. I'm not working outside of the home, so I don't have to do formal clothes anymore, professional, quote unquote, professional clothes. Although these days, professional clothes can mean almost anything from, track suits to three-piece suits. It just depends on where you have to go, whom you have to be with, and so forth and so on. Not that I'm sewing any three-piece suits, not right now.
Not right now, no.
I'm trying to catch up on blouses, which I desperately need in my wardrobe.
Have you picked a style that you're going to make?
Actually, I've picked a couple. I'm trying out some sort of balloon sleeves. Those seem to be very popular this season. So there are a couple of patterns that I'm trying out. And then it can get very hot here and humid. So I tend to make very sleeveless things, just very lightweight cotton or rayon sleeveless. And then I'll throw a loose jacket or something over it when I go outside just to keep the sun off my arms.
I understand that. I will make blouses with a sleeve to make sure that it's sun and also it protects me from mosquitoes because I get bitten quite easily.
So do I. They used to drive me nuts when I was living in the South. Long sleeves, but very lightweight, right?
Exactly. You're right. So now you live in Western New York.
Yes.
What's that like?
It's lots of green. There's snow in the winter sometimes. The summers are cooler in general than they are a couple of states like several hundred miles south of me. Definitely cooler and less humid than the South tends to be. Across the United States, it kind of depends on where you are, north and south-wise, rather than east or west. Although California is a state unto itself.
How long have you been sewing, Dell?
Oh, a long, long, long time. I was talking with one of my sisters last night, kind of reminiscing and remembering when we were very young, like 5 or 6 years old. For Christmas presents, we'd get embroidery samplers to do. So we learned embroidery, and both of our grandmothers crochet. No one knitted in my family. My grandmother and my mother all sewed. So we grew up in a house that constantly had 2 sewing machines. The old black Singer in a nice cabinet. At about 5th grade, I decided I wanted to make my Christmas dress. One of the grandmothers helped me. She kept wanting me to get the sleeve head in without any puckers, and I did not have the patience for that.
Oh, no.
So unfortunately, the sleeve heads were not quite to her standards, but she was quite a seamstress, so I didn't feel too bad.
That's a hard ask to get a setting sleeve on the first go.
Mm-hmm. First go, we're talking 3 or 4.
You make mention of another gown, a long gown that you wore while you were singing on stage.
I think I might have mentioned once on my blog that I made the gowns that I would wear on stage. As a classically trained vocalist, meaning I sing or sang what are called art songs, which is similar in design to opera. So the training would be the same. And so the custom generally is you wear a long gown when you're on stage. And if you're, doing a solo recital. Oh, I saved a lot of money making my gowns. One time, if not more than once, I used Bemberg lining fabric because it's the only thing I could find that suited the color that I wanted. I kind of cheated. It wasn't silk.
On stage, it would have looked amazing.
Well, I hope so. They never knew anyway.
No, that was a part of your grandmother teaching you how to sew.
Yes, it was. And we used, and this is back in the 60s, we used the pattern instructions. I really read those carefully in those days. And that's how I learned so much sewing, because the grandmas would alternate and one would be with us and then the other would be with us. So I didn't always have that sewist to lean on and to ask questions of.
You make mention here of the mail order sewing school. And is that how your grandmother learned to sew?
I don't know. I didn't find out about that mail order sewing school until like about 2013, 14, 15, somewhere around in there.
Right.
Long after she had passed, after both grandmothers had passed. And I always wondered where she learned to sew, because she would tell us that she had come in a covered wagon across country to settle in what was then Oklahoma Territory. That's not very conducive generally to becoming a seamstress. Her family did not settle in any city. So I always wondered how she learned. And when I discovered Mary Brooks Picken and the fact that she had founded a school in the 20s for mail order instruction of sewing that just blossomed into a tremendous enterprise, then I've always wondered if that's how she learned to sew. Just a tremendous history from that woman and all that she did to help women learn a trade that they could do and raise a family at the same time. They could work it around and earn funds. And of course, that was, if she started in the 20s, it was going strong in the 30s, and that would have been Depression.
Yeah.
And then World War II into the 50s and 60s. I think the last Singer sewing book that she edited was 1981. So she was in it for the long haul.
Those Singer sewing books are classics that you'll find in a lot of people's sewing libraries. And when I see them in the op shops or the thrift stores, I have to have a look at them because they're always thorough.
They're just wonderful. The one that I have seems to focus on a lot of interior and household items rather than sewing clothes.
The other one is the Reader's Digest with sewing.
Yes.
I've still got mine from teenage years.
Oh, yeah. I have one too. Not from my teenage years. I found it in an op shop.
What state is your sewing room in?
Well, actually, it's rather neat at the moment.
Yeah.
You can possibly see my sewing table, also known as the dining room table. And actually, I've laid out a dress pattern that I was kind of cobbling up. It's a Helen's Closet free pattern. In fact, it's called the Orchard Dress, and you can make it in 4 lengths. And I cobbled off using freezer paper, a copy of just the top. So I cut it at the first length. And I want to try that for summer. It's spaghetti strap, very simple. And I think it will be easy. I'm hoping it will be easy to zip up, and I can see if I like the pattern. I think I will. And then I'll use some very lightweight cotton and do a dress and probably a couple more blouses.
Then you'll be set for the summer.
Well, I'll be on the way.
So if people want to see what you've been making or what you do make, where can they find you online?
Okay, my blog is curlsandskirls.wordpress.com. And a skirl, Skirl, a skirl is the sound that bagpipes make. And I have Scots heritage and I'm a musician. And it had a nice rhythm, curls and skirls. I decided to go with that. And on IG, and I'm not very active on Instagram, but there I am, SEW, _ curls and skirls.
Listeners, I just want to say thank you to Dell, because whenever she listens to a podcast, she always sends me a message on the So Organised Dell Instagram account saying how wonderful it is. So I'm just so blessed that you are a listener and also give me feedback. I always appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. And you've done some really great things. You introduced me through your broadcasts to Stokes patterns.
Yeah.
And those, I want to get to some of those and try them out. They sound and look fascinating. Also, Diane at Style Falcon. Very, very interesting. And so many other women.
Both Lindy and Diane are very dedicated to developing their patterns for people with an older body. Parts of our body has changed and it's not going to change back anytime soon.
Exactly.
The recognition of an older body and an older person is being recognized by Stocks and Style Falcon, as well as, encouraging us through the over 50 community to show who we are and what our style is.
Exactly. And with one of your just most previous interviews, also an older sewist or a sewist with more experience than some, that made me realize we really are not very visible. And it would seem like we just don't exist, but we have a great many folks, I think, with perhaps more time and a tad bit more capital to invest in sewing patterns. So, hey, world, better pay attention.
We're a demographic that is very vested in sewing clothes for ourselves and having clothes that look stylish for us that we can't buy in stores. And so we're making them.
Exactly. And that's starting to be recognized. I wish I could remember the source now, but I don't. But it is starting to be recognized in a few places. And then, of course, So Over 50 records and does the statistics of exactly what we're proving.
Last year's research that Judith Staley, she's the founder of So Over 50, she commissioned that study. And they looked at the visibility of older sewers on the grids of the larger pattern companies. And it was quite interesting that we haven't really made much headway since 2018 when So Over 50 started. We have made some headway, but there's still more to go.
Oh, yes. A lot more to go, I think.
Oh, Dell, are you part of a local sewing group at all?
No, I'm not. I'm a kind of all by myself sewist. I do have one sewing friend up in the city of Rochester, which I'm not in. And we chat every once in a while, but no, there's no one here. The American Sewing Guild, I think, is active, but I'm not sure where. I'm in a city that has a very large metropolitan area, and I'm not in the center of it, so I could easily go out to, one of the spokes. I'm kind of on the fringes.
So in a way, a community like So Over 50 has linked you to other sewers that you physically can't get to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Every day that I'm on either Instagram or internet, because I have no other sewists to communicate with or find out things from. And I always am searching online to see what people have said about a particular pattern before I try it out. That's very important.
So when people say that they're on Instagram, they've got a blog, that's actually quite good, because then you can at least find what they've been doing and see if it's something that you're interested in doing or something that you hadn't even thought of.
Exactly. Exactly. So many ideas, so many things I've learned from being online. Ankara, African print fabrics, which I love, the bright colors and the designs. I never would have heard about that.
Same here. Yeah, it's all from people online who are sharing what they make.
Mm-hmm.
Before we finish up, what advice would you give people who are about to sew again after not sewing for many years?
Just do it. If they haven't sewn and they're worried that everything has changed, perhaps some of the terminology has changed, but a seam is still a seam, a button is still a button, and you still need a buttonhole if you want the button to function. That's a new one, I think. You don't have to make buttonholes as long as you can get it on and off.
And there are these newfangled things called snaps.
And zips. We have zips too.
All of these sewing improvements, they just make our life a whole lot more interesting.
Yep.
Dell, thank you for your time today and for your insights about sewing and your family's history. Again, I really appreciate that you provide feedback about the podcast very regularly. I know a lot of people do, but especially you do. So thank you from me. And thank you for being on the podcast for Sew Over 50.
You are very welcome, Maria. It's my pleasure. Anytime.
Thanks, Dell.
Cheers.
This episode of Sew Over 50 podcast on Sew Organised Style was produced by me, Maria Theoharis, with permission of Dell. Sound by bensound.com. Many thanks for the ongoing support of the podcast Patreon contributors. Their ongoing monthly support enables me to develop these podcasts for free, and I hope that you'll join them. You can subscribe to Sew Organised Style podcast, spelled with an S and a Z on all good podcast apps. Make sure you go back and listen to our free Sew Over 50 podcast archive on Sew Organised Style podcast. We look forward to joining you in your sewing room next time. Stay safe, everyone.